Mr. Dave Marcus. So he's currently serving as the Director of Security Research for McAfee Labs, and he has more than 12 years of technical and management experience, so he brings a lot to this information security discussion. And he is going to talk to us about why InfoSec fails. So if Mr. Dave Marcus can come to the podium.
I'm Dave Marcus. I'm the Director of Threat Intelligence and Advanced Research at McAfee Labs. The team that I'm in charge of in the labs does very different things. We don't actually analyze malware per se. We don't actually analyze spam per se. What we do is we mine all the various data that the labs collects, and we try and connect the dots. So when I say threat intelligence, that's actually what we try to do. We actually try to connect the stuff that happens before the actual attack, the stuff that happens during the attack, and where the data goes afterwards. And we try and apply some kind of measure to it and figure out things like that. It's a pretty cool job at the end of the day. What I'm going to focus on today is what we do, I guess, wrong as an industry. And we do a lot of stuff wrong, but don't take that the wrong way. Don't take that as me saying I don't appreciate the work we all do. All right? A lot of us have spent our careers in defense, right? It's a vocation to a lot of us, defending things, stopping malware, stopping the bad guys. It's a vocation to a lot of that. But it comes down to this, is on the defensive side of the house, we are linear thinkers. We think linear. But if you look at the offensive side of the house, offense is all about non-linear thinking and really non-linear equations. So what I'm going to talk about today is what I think needs to change, give you some examples of why I think what we do doesn't really work systematically anymore. And then at the end, we'll talk about where we think things might be able to go in the future. A lot of people will not like what I have to say. A lot of people won't like the conclusions that I draw. That's cool. I got no problem with that. I'm open to an argument. That's why I'm here to poke in, prod you a little bit, and get you to think a little bit about outside the box. This is a very simple statement, and I have numbers and math to back this up. And when I say the attackers are winning, I mean the attackers are winning, period, game over. The operating system in many cases is a lost cause to protect. When Windows comes out, the day that Windows 8 comes out is the same day that Windows 8 will be completely compromised, cloned, and have buckets of malware, evasions, and attacks for it, right? We all know that. That's a simple fact, right? But think about this, it really comes down to this. Why are we continually challenged every single time a new operating system comes out? Why is it that as I am having this discussion and speaking, there are Metasploit evasions being written that will work out of the box right now against fully updated Windows 7, fully updated Windows 8 with all AV up to date? Why is that? And there's a significant reason why that actually is. We are challenged trivially every single day. Let me give you some numbers to actually back that up. The numbers that I share with you are numbers based upon McAfee Labs, so they're not industry numbers, they're McAfee Labs numbers. And here is the cost justification slide, right? If you have a look at one slide that justifies why we will all have a job in InfoSec until the day we die, this is probably it. That is the zoo number. This is the total amount of malware that we have collected and analyzed since the beginning of malware creation, around about the mid-80s or so. And look at the growth curve right there. And that, on the right-hand side, by the way, that number is approaching 90 million. All right, that's a assload of malware, to put a small number on it. But go back to the earlier stage of the chart, 2007, when there was only 10 million. And think about how easy it is for that 10 million to turn into 20 million, to turn into 40 million, to turn into 80 million, to turn into 160 million probably by the middle to late portion of this year. Why is that? We know so much about threats, but it doesn't seem our defensive solutions really keep pace with it, does it? Raise your hand if you think, just based upon this slide alone, AV is challenged, if not dead. You won't offend me, I work for McAfee at school, and it doesn't matter to me if you, I'll raise my hand too, because I think it's very challenged on a good day. Here's the issue, is as challenged as it is, no one has actually put forth a new solution to take its place. That's part of the problem. No one has positioned a solution that will kick us to the curve. So all you end up with is fighting this daily update game, right? And I can throw lots of other numbers here. This is the quarterly view of that other number. So, you're talking 8 million, 9 million every single quarter. You do the math on that. How many is that daily? You're talking 70,000 every single day. It's a lot of malware, all right? And it works. That's the interesting part of our defensive side versus offensive side. When someone creates a new build of Zeus or a new Zeus Trojan, there's a good 60% chance that is going to work on most systems that have complete up-to-date AV. And this is a guy who works in McAfee that's saying that. And we'll get into exactly why that is in just a second or two. You look at the amount of rootkits and stuff that we see, huge increase here too. And this is where the bad guys get the bang for their buck too, right, is in the rootkit side of the house. Because when you successfully evade or teabag AV, what can you do? You can then install anything else you want on the system, right? So you don't see one generally without the other. If you look at Zeus, it's got a lot of stealth built into it. You know, there's a lot of newer stuff today, like Kudador is real popular, Cridex is real popular, Zero Access is real popular, and these are brand new rootkits. There's even some 64-bit stuff that's really nasty. How many of you are up on Reddit and know what an IAMA is? An IAMA is an interesting thread where someone will say, I am a, ask me questions. There was a thread that I read just out in the lobby that was posted, I think, yesterday. I am a botnet master and rootkit author. All right, and it was an IAMA with a person who is right now writing malware, writing rootkits, and running a botnet. And it's almost like he read my slides because it's a great illustration of the difference between a nonlinear thinker, an attacker, and a linear solution, AV. And his comments toward why he is so successful with only a year's worth of coding experience is fascinating. I want you to think about that for a minute. How long have we been doing these types of solutions? 20 years? 25 years? And yet you take someone and in a year's period of time is now a successful botnet master and rootkit writer. And you have to ask yourself, why? And his comments are fascinating because he looked at all the things that AV protects against and writes his malware to go around it. Classic nonlinear thinking. And his comments toward his success are fascinating too. He only makes $40 to $400 a day from his botnet use. That's fascinating, actually, isn't it? He uses Tor to hide his traffic, but he really goes step by step through how he targets people, how he gets malware installed in their systems, and his comments on how to evade host-based security solutions are absolutely fascinating. I suggest every single person in here go to Reddit when the session is over, not during, because that would just be rude, and read what he has to say and be open to what he has to teach us, because I think one of his most fascinating comments is, randomness is your friend. Traditional security can't deal with randomness. That's right out of his Reddit. And it's absolutely a fascinating statement that kind of goes to the heart of what I'm really talking about here. Is this number is reflective of signed binaries and signed malware just since September of last year. Where did signed malware become famous? Dooku and Stuxnet, right? They used signed binaries and stuff like that. And for those of you who don't know exactly why that's so significant, when you actually take a key, when you actually sign a piece of malware, what did it just become? Shout it out if you know. Whitelisted driver. That's what it just became. So what does that mean when you actually turn a piece of malware into a whitelisted driver? It means it can do anything it friggin' wants on the operating system. Security solutions will ignore it. Whitelisting solutions will ignore it. The operating system itself will ignore it. And this is the influence that Dooku and Stuxnet have had just since September of last year. Again, classic non-linear thinking versus us linear thinking solutions guys. Hey, that signed binary thing works really well. Why don't I start using it out in the wild? So you'll see new things like Cridex, which is a rootkit, Zero Access, which is a rootkit, have whitelisted components in that. Classic non-linear thinking, figuring out a way that circumvents traditional AV and then going buck crazy with it. The problem I'm seeing is this, is we also, as defensive InfoSec guys, really don't seem to have the ability to learn from our own history. We have 20 plus years of offensive aggressor malware training and teaching and information, right? But if you look at some of the newer operating systems today, look at Android, look at mobile in general, does that look disturbingly familiar? Does that growth curve look disturbingly familiar? The same exploitation curve, the same cybercrime growth rate in mobile as in the PC world, all right? That's fairly disturbing. And what's even more disturbing is the user behavior on those platforms, right? people will click anything. Especially if you give them a picture of a lolcat or something, right? You know, it's arguably easier to social engineer people today because of their trust in technology than it ever was before. Throw to that the fact that most solutions on the mobile platform do exactly what they do on the PC platform, which is they are linear solutions looking for a signature or looking for some bit that is off, and you end up with this type of growth happening again. That is just like deja vu. It's absolutely fascinating to me. This is a threat map. We in the labs, we actually do some what are known as threat mapping. This is a pre-execution threat map. So the first column on the left, the big first column, is the things that the bad guy does. I apologize, it's a bit of an eye chart and stuff, but you can check out the slides later. The big column on the left is the stuff the attacker does to get their malware to you. So the stuff that they're doing out in the world, setting up an URL, setting up domain names, stuff like that. The blue column on the right is the stuff they do to get you to take an action. I want you to think about this for a minute, because since the beginning of malware history to right now, these vectors have not changed. And when I give you the post-execution stuff, it becomes even more apparent, is that the post-execution of malware and threats has really not changed. I want you to think about that for a minute, because that means there's a disconnect between what we're knowing about threats and what we're doing with them in our solutions. I want you to remember that for a little later on down the line. So when you think about it, there's only a handful of ways the attacker can get their stuff to you, right? Website, email attachment, social media, whatever. But it comes down to how easy it is to trick someone into clicking the link, right? I want you to think about that from the point of view of innovation. Where's the innovation happening and where's it not happening? Who works in a big enterprise? How many of you people who work in a big enterprise, do those enterprises actually have anti-phishing training? Or is it just awareness training, right? Where they sit you down in front of a slide deck and they say, this is a phish, don't click it. Now you have your awareness training, go back to work, right? That's generally what the form that it takes, right? How many people actually have instituted anti-hacking training, anti-phishing training, anti-social engineering training? I'm not saying that it won't get you phished or social engineered. What I'm saying is if you want your people to not get phished or less likely to click a phish, you got to phish them. All right, you got to hack them, you got to social engineer them, you got to sit them down in a room, you got to throw links at them, see which ones they click, then train them how to act appropriately. Because these will work until the end of time against people who are not trained. Who studies the martial arts? Right? How do you not get hit? By someone throwing stuff at your noggin, right? Until you figure out, maybe I should put my hands up. Maybe I should change my behavior, right? It's really the same thing. It's like when you send people through basic training in the military. If you want people to not get, you got to subject them to training and offensive training. Yet there seems to be very little that's embraced in corporate America, and even the AV community is actually very hands-off when it comes to embracing malware writing and writing our own malware. That's a taboo. Let me tell you something. You want to start a fight between AV vendors? Start talking about AV vendors need to write their own malware, and think about the next 10 attacks in the next 2 years worth of attacks. You want to start a holy war? That'll do it. Yet it's not embracing nonlinear thinking when you think about it. How can you produce a solution to combat next year's threats if you don't write what you think next year's threats are? Help me. Because it doesn't work for me, yet that's the industry defensive infosec that we work in. Very linear in its thinking. So you think about it, all these same things happen. By the way, you could throw an APT, I hate that word, but we'll leave that alone for a whole variety of reasons. You could you can map out the beginning stage, the ending stage, and the post-execution stage of any threat since the beginning of time till now, no matter how advanced it is, and it will utilize the Chinese menu that is these different columns, okay? And I want to think about that. That means next year's attacks are going to use the same vectors and they will have the same measure of success, yet our solutions don't seem to do a lot about it. This is the flip side. This is the post-execution side of the threat maps and the threat graphs. Probably the most important column here is the big column on the second blue column on the left. That is the persistence and keep alive column. That's how the malware writer keeps their stuff live on your system. That's where the innovation happens, my friends. All right, that's where the bad guys have our game. That's where they have the game of the operating system and the game of host-based security solutions. They know how we do what we do. Think about that for a minute. If they know how to do, if they know how we do what we do, it's relatively straightforward for them to maintain persistence every single time. This is why Zeus is continually problematic. This is why SpyEye, I9, this is why all this malware is continually problematic, because they find new ways to be innovative in the area of persistence and shutdown. It's going toward the same things. If you look at some of the stuff that's in that column, and again, I apologize, it's a bit of an eye chart, you can check it out later, but they're going to be doing the same 6 or 7 things to maintain persistence. It's just how they go about injecting the process that changes every single time. And a linear solution like host-based AV can't deal with the randomness. There's a great line in the Reddit IAMA today that the malware author uses, and I'm kind of cribbing it here. He says something along the lines of, if you want to evade AV, write your own cryptors. Randomness is your friend. Randomize everything you can. And I was just like, that's non-linear thinking right there. And that is why they will continue to win at the end of the day, because of thinking like that. And we will continue to be challenged because we don't react in a very innovative and agile way. So why is it getting worse? All right? Who knows what that is? That is a Menger sponge. All right? A Menger sponge is a construct from chaos theory. And this is an animation of what it actually is. And what it has to teach us is this, is within any three-dimensional space, there is infinite possibilities and infinite variety. What this is actually doing is it is actually removing a portion of itself, but every time it removes a piece of itself, it creates more surface area. All right? So what this actually shows us, and it will never approach 0, by the way. So what this has to teach us is that within any space, and doesn't that cube look strangely like the representation of an operating system? Huh? Right? Inside a confined space that is an operating system, you have unlimited varieties and unlimited evasions and unlimited potential for non-linear movement and non-linear thought. Yet, when you think about what we do on the defensive side of host-based security, everything we do is linear. We cannot cope with non-linearity and evasion and everything else. This is essentially why it is so challenging to have host-based AV do its job on a daily basis, is because the bad guys can always throw randomness at us, they can throw cryptors at us, and go right around. But it's not a combination of AV, it's the host-based model. Because anything within that system is subject to the conditions of the system, isn't it? All right, think about that for a minute. As long as we play by the rules of the system, we are subject to the conditions of the system. Remember that line? It's going to come back in just a minute. All right? This is where all of today's innovation is actually going. Let's be honest. It's a whole lot cooler and sexier to write Metasploit evasions than it is to write AV signatures. Okay? You get the chicks with one, don't get the chicks with the other. And it's all about, where you get the chicks from, let's be honest here. That's why we're all in InfoSec, because it's all about them. I wish. But I think you get what I'm saying, is it's more interesting to say, oh, look, AV is dead, here's another evasion, than come up with a solution that replaces AV. All right? How many people in here actually can write their own Metasploit evasions and actually do their own crypting and actually produce their own malware? Don't be shy. I know you can. You've been smiling too much. So, but my point is how many of those same people who apply that non-linear thinking can come up with a solution that replaces AV? I want to see the non-linear thinking and the innovative thinking go from offset to defset. We need to take the same thinking that fuels offensive security and bring it over to the defensive security side of the house. Who knows what that is? That is a Lorenz attractor, another construct from chaos theory. And what you see there are four, it's kind of cheating. You got an x-axis, a y-axis, and a z-axis. And what Lorenz figured out through a simple calculator is that within any three-dimensional space, x, y, and z, you can have formulas that never repeat and never overlap, and you will never see again, all right? A lot of the malware that we run into, we will never see again. Especially if you look at a targeted attack, we will never ever see that malware again. And it will have used conditions and it will have applied conditions to the OS that we won't see again. We'll only know about it in retrospect, which is after the victim was compromised and they moved on. But this is the game that we continue to play. We continue to abide by the rules of the operating system, and we therefore are challenged on a good day, losing completely on a bad day. Think about this from the point of view of exploiting memory. Malware doesn't have to play by the rules. All right? Metasploit stuff doesn't have to play by the rules. We, as security solutions in the operating system, have to play by the rules. That means this. That means there are areas of memory we can't access. There's areas of memory we can't look at. There's areas of memory we can't touch. All right? Which is why rootkits, by the way, work and are so effective, because they can go over there where we're not allowed to go or affect. So as long as we continue to play by the conditions that the operating system applies to us, we will continue to basically fight a very painful battle at the end of the day. So consider this. Consider the top two blue boxes, right? You've got the operating system, and you've got all the juicy data that's within it. And lo and behold, I actually have a solution to talk about here. I'm not talking about product or anything like that. I'm proposing a different way of thinking about security. If you think about it, the applications of security and the data that secures most of those pieces, when you think about it, data and the solutions that protect data occupy the same space, right? The operating system. Yeah? Part of every single attack is shutting down AV and shutting down security software and everything else, right? Because they're in the same space. It's actually very, very easy to do. What I would suggest, I hit the wrong button. Where's the back? There we go. All right, you can compromise the virtual machine. What I would suggest is, going forward, we need to move our point of view and our solutions from inside the operating system down into utilizing silicon. All right, and let me explain what I mean by that and what I don't mean by that. What I don't mean by that is we should put AV on a chip. That's not what I mean. All right, what I mean is this. I know it's a little bit small, but if you can see the line above the box that says BIOS, you'll see things like I/O, network, and other things. What that is the functionality that the chipset of silicon allows us to use. And I'll give you some specific examples in a minute. But silicon allows us to have a different point of view from the operating system. It actually allows us to do things like look at memory in a native state, but not do it from within the confines of the operating system or from within the user permissions or system permissions of the operating system. Think about that for a minute. When you're attacking the kernel or you're attacking IDT tables or SSD tables, it's hard for security software to stop that because it's not allowed actually to access most of those areas. But if you can hook something like the VM layer or the virtualization layer of the chipset, you can access that completely from outside the actual operating system. You can see memory in its complete table structure from outside, not from inside, when you can't see the memory area you're not allowed to access, but you can step out of the operating system and actually see the memory tables and the kernels and all of the kinds of I/O from a different state and a different point of view. That means you can write different content and you can take different actions. When I say this, I'm not saying we should throw out everything and use the chipset. That's not what I'm saying. We were acquired by Intel about a year or so ago, and we started getting schooled in silicon and what silicon can do. But more to the point, what silicon extensions can actually do. If you're familiar, there's been the ability to utilize silicon for some very interesting things for going on 8 years, vPro, AMT and things like that, as a standard that existed for 5 years and 8 years, but they've really never been used with the exception of energy management. So what we started doing about a year ago is we started thinking, how can we use the VTX extensions to monitor memory? How can we use the VTD extensions to protect against direct memory access attacks? A lot of the discussions are still going on, but it started making us think in ways that got us out of the operating system and got us out of being confined by the parameters of the same system we are trying to protect. And it's caused us and made us think in a lot of very, very different ways. So what I would propose is this. I would propose most people start looking at the silicon extensions and the IA architecture. You can insert any other chipset in here if you wanted to, by the way. AMD, a lot of the others, AMD and some of the other chip makers have got very robust extensions to allow you to use silicon in very different ways as well. I'm using Intel as an example because who do I work for? I work for Intel. And I'm more familiar with the chipset here than I am with others. But if you look on the left, you've got extensions that allow you to do very unique things. Cryptography, AES, a lot of things. Now think about that from this point of view. If you've got the power of silicon that won't impede the function of the operating system, by the way, and you can do things like encryption, think about what you could do with something like, I don't know, secure keyboarding or secure passages up from silicon into the I/O shell or up through silicon, through the SSD drive, out onto the network card. Silicon allows us to do a lot of those kinds of things. Think about all the guys that are cracking keys with GPU cycles, right? They're taking a slice of the GPU, the graphics processing unit that's actually on the graphics card, and they're devoting it to the cracking of MD5s and keys. Think about that for a minute. Why should we let them have all the fun? Why should we let them get all the glory and get all the chips? All right? That's a classic use of using silicon and using different processing in a very innovative way. And I would submit that there's something to be said for that. Requires a lot of different thinking, requires a lot of different training. But there are so many different extensions within the chipset that really only one core gets used at any one particular time. Most of the other cores lay silent and dormant, not having their extensions used. And if you look at where Intel is going even with mobile processors, all of these extensions exist in the mobile processing core as well. Wouldn't it be nice for us to actually go down a path innovatively that allows us to not recreate the same old failing solutions for mobile that we've created for the PC world? Start thinking in terms of silicon. How can I use the Atom chip to actually stop rootkits? How can I use the Atom chip to actually engage the network directly? Think about that for a minute. Think about using a network card's processor. It has the power of a 486 processor, by the way. Not all that much today, but think about the routines that you could actually have just that card run to do network-based analysis or network-based defenses. All right? That's, I would submit, a very interesting line of thought to start looking at. And all of these extensions exist in the I-Core series of chips, and even for the future chipsets, we're also looking at specific slices for a security cycle, all kinds of things like that. And I would submit, again, that this is a very interesting route to go down. It won't solve all of our problems, but it at least allows us to not replicate a lot of the same problems in the mobile world that we see in the PC world. And wouldn't that at least be nice? You know, it'd be nice to play by our own rules going forward a little bit. So I highly recommend that start getting familiar with the chipsets and the power of chips and silicon. What you can also do when you're starting to look at silicon is you can do things like attribution and intelligence mining as well. One of the problems that we have is what? The reason the bad guys create so much malware is because very few of them ever go to jail, right? Because attribution is really difficult in our world. 2 years ago, most of our customers, and I spent time with a lot of customers, didn't ask us about attribution. They didn't want to know who wrote the malware or where their data went. It was just like, stop the freaking malware, you know, so they could get on with the day. But now, you know, there's so much money that the bad guy is stealing. They want to know who wrote it, where did it come from, where did my data go? All right? Most security solutions never re-architected themselves to answer those questions. So by utilizing, again, silicon, we have the power to actually do hardcore event store writing, hardcore encryption, hardcore attribution analysis. You know, you think about taking your chip and actually using a dedicated offload path for any change that happens to the operating system to be written to a secure event store. Think about that from the point of view of doing attribution and forensic analysis. You can theoretically, hopefully get somebody in jail based upon that type of data that you could collect, or at least you could build up a corpus of data that LEOs and others could use to actually take action and stuff like that. So again, it allows you a level of power you don't get within the operating system, and it allows you to do some very, very different things. So when you have some time, go and Google IA, or hit me up later and I'll send you some links to the Intel architecture, or just any silicon architecture, and start thinking along the lines of what can we do in silicon. You can't solve every problem in silicon, and some of them may be combined solutions, partially using silicon, partially doing things within the operating system. We've been looking at how we can use slices of silicon to better protect the agents that are inside the operating system. So if you think about that, even if you start leveraging silicon, you can do a better job inside the OS by offloading certain things to silicon. So it becomes very, very interesting. So to wrap up, nonlinear thinking. We have to be as agile as the bad guys are and really take a very, very close look at how we create solutions and how we create products today. And again, going back to the comparison of PC malware versus mobile malware, I think the model that we are currently working under needs to die a very quick death. Things need to change because, quite frankly, we are not winning the battle. Our ability to do our jobs in the current methodology and in the current model is hampered at best. So we have to start thinking, how can we get out or not be subject to the same conditions of the system that the malware subjects us to. Embracing nonlinear thinking and solutions will allow us to do that. Embracing silicon and embracing hardware. A lot of this was really never looked at successfully in the first place. Again, don't forget, malware developed over time. Security solutions developed after malware started getting written. Think about that for a minute. So a lot of security solutions, even the original AV stuff, didn't get created until when? Malware started actually getting written. So you think about that, that means the bad guys are actually pushing our roadmap. That's not really a very effective model to work under. Silicon was really never embraced early because the functions weren't there. Hardware was really never embraced fully because the functions weren't there. We're at a different period of time. There's robust extensions that can really be looked at now that could never be looked at before. Attribution and intelligence. If you want to make your million or your millions in InfoSec, this is the area to be in. InfoSec is needing attribution and intelligence solutions. IP addresses do not equal attackers, all right? And that is what most takedowns are based upon. It's lots of IP address information. IPs are one vector. If you go down the thinking of IP addresses equal attacker, then you get ridiculous thoughts like China's responsible for everything, just because they go back to Chinese IP addresses. It doesn't really work that way. And if it did, then all spam would be an American conspiracy, by the way, because historically 80% of all spam comes from US-based addresses, okay? So we need good intelligence and attribution solutions. If I had to, obviously they're very interrelated here, but the attribution thing is a really big deal. If you can spend your time actually figuring out who wrote what code and can do that with a degree of certainty and actually throw 100,000 binaries through some system and actually say, those 100,000 binaries, 20,000 of them were written by this group, 20,000 by that group, 30,000 by the other group, with a degree of accuracy, you will make a mince worth of money, because those are the questions law enforcement wants to answer. Those are the questions our enterprise customers want to answer. That's even the question that consumers want to answer. So if you can answer those kinds of attributional questions going forward, that's a real big deal. And then if you can actually answer the, is it state-sponsored versus a proxy, real intelligence, that's also going to be a real big deal going forward. It's not guesswork anymore. We've been playing guesswork games up until now, quite frankly, and that just won't fly. The last thing I would submit is join or create a hackerspace. A lot of this stuff is a great place to actually come up with. I'm a member of a hackerspace in Maryland called Unallocated Space, and I've probably learned more questionably illegitimate ideas there in the last year and a half than I have in the rest of my time in InfoSec. And there's something to be said for out-of-the-box thinkers and a place where you can actually go to engage in out-of-the-box thinking and stuff like that. I run most of my ideas through my hackerspace and stuff, and they will tune me on things and say, this is right, this is not right, giving me great ideas on botnet takedowns, great ideas on attribution and stuff like that, because it's such a wide variety of out-of-the-box thinkers. So if you can find a hackerspace, join a hackerspace. If not, better yet, create a hackerspace, because nonlinear equals hacker, by the way. A nonlinear thinker is a hacker, and we need more hackers and nonlinear thinkers. That, my friends, is all I had for you. Are there any questions I can answer? If you want to hit me up later for information on malware or on Intel Silicon or stuff like that, I'm happy to give it to you. If you have any questions, I'm happy